So in my 20s, after becoming a kind of a confirmed agnostic, I'd made up my mind that reality was not an illusion, it wasn't a fantasy, it wasn't an evolutionary construction as much as it was. To me, it seemed apparent that it was purposeful, and that human life had intrinsic sort of value. I had to consider what does that mean? What does that mean to me? Right? What are our responsibilities towards one another? If that's true, then I have not only responsibilities for my own life, but I'm responsible for other people's too, or I have some kind of obligation, some kind of real, call it spiritual or whatever, sort of connection to others. So my first tendency, being someone who had grown up with an environment and with a surrounding of people who rejected the societal norms of the West, the Judeo-Christian model of ethics, and kind of the monotheistic understanding, that I had grown up, myself being hostile to. That's not where I went first. I looked, in the places that were much more attractive to me. Obviously, the exotic sorts of spirituality of the East. I looked at Western philosophy to the extent that it was detached from Christianity to some extent, but I was more. I wasn't, that sort of philosophical tendencies tend to bend towards atheism, humanism and atheism. I was looking for something more than that. If you're going to talk about universal human value and truth, you naturally, you have to consider the spiritual, the mystical, even. So I spent some time looking at Eastern philosophies of yoga and karma and reincarnation, Buddhism and Jainism, specifically. And these had the effect of, as I studied them and began to learn a bit about them in my early 20s, not much, but enough to grasp some of the conceptions of reality that they expressed. I grew a bit prideful because I felt like I was able to kind of cobble together, my own sort of ethical foundation and understanding to morality and the human condition. I was foolhardy enough to think that I could assemble something of value just by cobbling together different ideas and understandings of wisdom and truth from whatever traditions I personally found value in, without any guidance or anything else from anyone else. And I do recall some of the circles I was in, and I would have spiritual, quote unquote, deep spiritual conversations with other people my age, in their early 20s, that were, in some sense, looking for the same thing I was, looking for meaning and purpose, and rejecting traditional Western understandings, traditional societal norms, just like me, without really understanding them, just rejecting them outright, out of hand. I would have conversations with these people, and they, including my parents, approved and even somewhat admired, what I was doing, that I was exploring and learning and practicing and sharing something of value. This gave me a sense of pride. What I didn't expect is that when I set out on this journey to hunt, to explore meaning and truth in the world, what I didn't really expect is to be confronted with something undeniable, something that would that I would have to submit to rather than own. You look at Eastern religion. As far as I understood it, as far as I conceived of it, it's this idea of understanding purpose and understanding systematic approaches to deal with human reality in a way where you have some control over it. You can relieve suffering. You can increase your sense of peace, and you can be healthier, and you can control your destiny to some degree. It's a very empowering sort of understanding. And that's what I received. I received a very self-affirming, empowering, sort of personal philosophy to life. But I wasn't ever satisfied, right? I wasn't ever satisfied with those endeavors. I kept looking, I kept searching, I kept reading, I kept and eventually, I started reading the Bible. And when I started reading the Bible, I was immediately sort of confronted with something unexpected, in the sense that I had all these preconceived notions, right? These notions about who the God of the Bible was, and who Christians were, and therefore, who Jesus was, and what the church was about. But when I actually started reading the Bible, I saw a God who wasn't concerned, first and foremost, with punishment and submission and egotism, but rather a God who was concerned with justice and blessing and goodness and righteousness, and who was jealous for the affections of human beings, because, not for his ego, but because he created them to be loved by him and to respond to that love. This immediately shocked me in a way that compelled me to continue to read the Bible. And when I encountered Jesus, it was a sort of wisdom like you would never encounter in Eastern religion. To learn of God in Jesus is to know a God that that is submissive, that is humble, that is a servant, a suffering servant who through humility and through suffering and through weakness reconciles the proud, the arrogant, the violent. And subjugates evil through peace and love and gentleness. It overturned everything in my mind. I'd never encountered anything that even resembled the God as revealed in Jesus. So I kept reading. I was compelled to learn more. Like I wanted to know what other people thought about this, right? What other people knew about the Bible. And of course I encountered people who, and everybody will encounter people, especially, here in the South, who confess, to know Jesus and to love Jesus, but don't really think much about who he was or why he did the things he did or said the things he said, or really want to think very deeply about their faith or who they believe, God to be, or the purpose of the incarnation. Any of what, the Bible really emphasizes in Christ, the big questions. Like, if God is revealed in Jesus, like what does that mean? Well, what does that say about God? What does that say about us? So these are the questions I had, and I started, asking people to have these conversations with me. And I encountered some people that really loved God, and that just compelled me to keep asking these questions and keep having these conversations. Eventually, I met a girl who, I was really attracted to, first of all, but she loved Jesus, and she went to a church, and I chased her into this church. Maybe to learn more about God, but primarily just to chase her. But when I chased her into this church, I encountered a bunch of people my own age, early mid-20s, post-college Christians that were thoughtful and intelligent and really open and willing and excited to have these conversations with me. And that's something I never even knew. I never even knew was the case. I never even knew that there were groups of people my age that were just as curious and just as interested about the the same questions that I was, that were also, um, confessing Christians. So, and then, I was there for I don't know, the better part of a year before I finally got it. Before I finally understood, the gospel. And when I got it, I just again, I came to this moment in my life where I was confronted with a reality that I couldn't deny, right? And when I confessed Jesus, when I became a Christian myself, I did so with the full weight and knowledge that I didn't get to determine any longer what my purpose in life was, or what direction it would take necessarily anymore. Because these things are now subject to God. Like he defined from this point forward, who I was and what meaning my life had. And this was amazingly difficult for me to submit to, and at the same time, it's incredibly wonderful and freeing, wonderfully freeing, that to realize and to know that we're not meant to figure it out, that the world does not need humanity to be its masters. We're neither able nor rightfully endowed with the abilities to be masters of this world, or even of ourselves. The Lord created us to submit to Him and to communicate Him. We're created, our purposes are His purposes are to be the same. To know that through the greatest sacrifice comes the greatest good was revolutionary to my understanding of ethics. To adhere to a biblical worldview means allowing God to always determine what's right and good and true, both theoretically and situationally. So unlike Eastern, religion or any kind of ethical principle that that's about obtaining happiness or getting to an end point that's more positive, than your current position in life. Biblical ethics, gospel ethics, says we have a God that's in control, that desires to bless us, that wants our good. Okay, so a God who is omnipotent and infinite and purposeful in all things, in our own creation, in the creation of everything else and everyone else. Right? And we have a God that did everything to bring that about. We have a God that has shown us that His good is the ultimate good. If we follow His lead, then we are His fellow workers, right? We are and as co-heirs if we submit to Him. That God is the ultimate value, that we aren't, that we can't. That we don't make things right. We can't determine what is good and evil apart from what God has revealed. So the Christian life is a life not of making, not of having the responsibility to make the world perfect, but to do good because God has shown us what is good. It's a life of submission, with submission with knowledge that you're submitting to someone who has shown us our value through His sacrifice and shown His own value through that same sacrifice. So currently, my ethical understanding is what you might call what is referred to as a divine command theory of ethics, which means that God determines truth, and God determines what Christianity calls righteousness, perfect justice, and that God is good, and God is loving, and those things are defined in and through Him. And that we can only do what is good and what is right in Him and by Him and for Him.